Shadow the Hedgehog is a character that holds a special place in my heart. I've been attached to him ever since I played SA2 as a kid. His design, his powers, and his story especially all made me a lifelong fan of the character. I'll admit, part of that is nostalgia and because he was my introduction to more angsty, tragic characters, but even so, he still left a big impact on me. So, what about him resonated with me so much? Well, in short, it's because despite being mired in a lot of darkness and deception, deep down, Shadow's character and story carried a simple but sincere message about following the good in our hearts. To expand on that, I'll be going over Shadow's past and his actual story in SA2. With all that said, let's get started. Shadow was originally created by Professor Gerald to do good. He was the ultimate life form whose purpose in life was to benefit mankind. Before he could go to Earth and truly live this out, however, he unfortunately never got the chance. Shadow lost a lot the day the Ark was attacked. His home, his future, and his purpose. All of it was taken from him because of humanity's cruelty and evil. What affected him most of all, however, was the loss of his best friend Maria. She was just a sweet and innocent girl, but their attackers didn't care and were relentless. They hunted the both of them down, and in the end, after she made a last-ditch effort to save Shadow, she was killed. Before saving him, though, she gave him one last request. She asked him to give the people of Earth the fate they deserved, for her sake. Which, after they'd been dealt such a terrible injustice, Shadow could only interpret as one thing: revenge. With that, Shadow makes it his mission to end mankind. Now, not all of this is accurate, because after this incident, Shadow was left comatose for 50 years, and in that time, Professor Gerald retooled him by tampering with his memories. Why would he do that? Well, because Maria was his granddaughter, and her death completely broke him. So much so that he lost faith in mankind and devised a plan to destroy the world. A plan that had Shadow at its center. Now, the full extent of his tampering is never really known, but with what we're shown, Shadow was given Gerald's doomsday plans, and an important memory of Maria was messed with. I'll touch upon the second thing when the time comes, but for now, this is who Shadow has become. The ultimate life form, a being meant to benefit mankind, is now a weapon of destruction. One whose awakening would mark the beginning of the end. All it takes is for one greedy human to be tempted by his destructive power, and Eggman is just the person to take the bait. Which brings us to the events of SA2 proper. When awakened, Shadow wastes no time to see his mission through. He may present himself as a grateful servant to Eggman, but it's all a ruse to use him, which he tries to do immediately by ordering him to gather more Chaos Emeralds to the space colony Ark. Eggman is a bit unsure about him and his request at first, but after Shadow presents him with the world-destroying Eclipse Cannon and tempts him with the prospect of world domination, he falls right into his hands. And so, with his help, along with the mysterious treasure hunter, Rouge the Bat, the three set out to collect the emeralds and repower the cannon. From here, Shadow basically just lets Eggman handle things and only really takes initiative when he feels the mission is at stake. And that's really all he does for the rest of the Dark story. Almost like a machine, all Shadow cares about is completing his objective. The lies he has to make, the consequences of it all, even his own memories and self-preservation, nothing but the mission matters. It's important to remember, though, that this commitment of his isn't because he's some mindless robot fulfilling its protocol. This all stems from a personal place. His bond and promise to Maria, which were constantly shown throughout the game. All this is to say that Shadow has a heart, and there's even hints that he's a good person deep down. But after everything he's been through, this is all that matters to him. It's all he has left. It's honestly really tragic. His former life was taken from him 50 years ago, and now he's so shackled to his past that his only real reason to go on is to eventually end it all. He's never really been free to live his own life. Sad as this is, he remains firm in his mission and by the end, reaches his objective. Still unaware of Shadow's true intent, Eggman enters the last Chaos Emerald into the cannon, and with that, the last stage of Gerald's doomsday plan commences. Now that all the emeralds have been installed, the Ark sets off on a crash course to Earth. Doomsday has finally come. With everything on the line, everyone hatches a plan and works together to stop the Ark and save the world. Everyone but Shadow, that is, who's just waiting for it all to end. This is what he wanted after all. Despite that, Amy goes to him and asks him for his help. She begs Shadow to give humanity a chance because even though they can be bad and selfish, deep down they're good people and should be allowed to follow their dreams. This sentiment triggers Shadow's memory of Maria's wish once more, but this time in its entirety. Even after being dealt such a terrible injustice, the future she actually wanted Shadow to give mankind was one where they could be happy and live for their dreams. Despite everything the two had gone through, her good heart remained strong, and all she ever asked of him was to be the hero she knew he always was. This is what Gerald tampered with all that time ago, but having regained this pure and selfless memory of his friend, Shadow is so moved by it that he's compelled to do the right thing. And so, after being led astray by all the darkness and deception in his life, Maria's guiding light brings the ultimate life form back to his original purpose. He becomes a hero, and what better way to show this change than by having him fight a representation of who he once was. As a last safeguard to ensure Gerald's plans, the Bio-Lizard comes out, and its parallels to Shadow are clear. It may be a prototype, but it's still an ultimate life form that was retooled into a weapon of destruction, and will do absolutely anything to fulfill its new purpose. Even if it means sticking the Eclipse cannon up its own bum and ramming it into the Earth itself, it'll stop at nothing to achieve its mission, just like Shadow did before him. Unlike the Bio-Lizard, however, Shadow's always had a heart, and while it may have been what held him to his past, it was only through his heart that he was capable of changing for the better. That's the key difference between the genuine ultimate life form and this prototype. Shadow isn't just bound to his objective. He has his own thoughts and feelings. He's alive, and after all this time, he's finally able to truly live. Before moving on to the actual ending of his story, though, there's one last character I want to talk about in relation to Shadow, and that's Sonic. Now, Shadow's similar appearance to Sonic has always been something people have questioned, and I get it. It's never really explained, and while it can be assumed that Gerald's study on Angel Island led him through this prophetic mural of Sonic, thus inspiring Shadow's design, that's never really brought up. Narratively and thematically, however, I think it's pretty clear why the two are made to look so similar. On Shadow's end, it's to continue to highlight the tragedy of his character. Where Shadow lost his heroic purpose and was bound to his past, Sonic was a free spirit who saved the world countless times. Sonic essentially represents his lost life. He's the hero that Shadow could have been if it wasn't for the Ark incident. Meanwhile, on Sonic's end, Shadow represents a level of power that Sonic needs to reach. If he's going to make it through this adventure and overcome Shadow, then he needs to master Chaos Control, and by the time we reach the final fight, both gain what the other had. Shadow becomes just as heroic as Sonic, and Sonic becomes just as powerful as Shadow. Why is this so important? Well, because a heroic and powerful protector of Earth is what really defines the ultimate life form. Now, I know the lore reason Shadow is deemed the ultimate life form is because of his immunity to diseases, but as far as the game's narrative is concerned, what makes someone the ultimate life form is their ability to make the world a better place. All Gerald ever says about it in-game is that it was meant to benefit mankind, and when Shadow questions the reason for his existence, the answer he and the audience are given comes in the form of Maria's wish. To further strengthen my point, Shadow even tells Sonic that he might be the true ultimate life form if you fight the Bio-Lizard long enough. The ultimate life form is the planet's greatest protector, which is why Shadow gives Sonic that title by the end. If anyone should have it, it should be the person with the strength and heart to always be there to save the Earth. Doesn't that also apply to Shadow too, you ask? Well, yes, but by this point he might already be aware of his own fate. You see, throughout the final battle, Shadow's been struggling to maintain his super form, and after the two use Chaos Control to teleport the Ark away from the Earth, he loses the remainder of his power and seemingly dies. After all this time, Shadow finally started living and fighting for the future, only to tragically not be a part of it. In the end, he never really got a chance to live his own life. Despite that, however, he was content because he was at least able to fulfill Maria's wish, and to him, that was enough. After Sonic returns to deliver the news, the group reflects on the whole ordeal. Rouge asks him if he thinks Gerald really created Shadow to destroy the world, but he tells her that that doesn't matter. When all was said and done, he was a brave and heroic hedgehog who gave his life to save the planet. That's what ultimately defined him. That's who Shadow the Hedgehog was. With that, Sonic gives him one last farewell, and the game ends with a final reminder of him and his sacrifice. And so, with this pure and selfless memory of the character, Shadow now does for the player what Maria did for him. He compels us to follow the good in our hearts and be the heroes we are deep down. Is that cheesy? Absolutely, especially with the Planet Shadow memorial at the end. But it's 100% the perfect note to end the game on. As a kid, the Rest Easy Heroes line in this last reminder of the character hit me hard. After everything he went through, to all culminate in this powerful act of friendship and heroism just meant a lot to me back then, and is what really cemented him in my heart. This is what I was talking about at the start of the video. Beyond all the darkness and deception surrounding the character lies a simple but impactful message about keeping a strong, hopeful heart, and to always fight for what's right. For the time, that was the legacy and memory of Shadow the Hedgehog. Of course, that's not really where his story ended. Even though he was originally meant to stay dead, his popularity brought him back. Was it worth it? Well, the answer is yes. And no. On one hand, it inherently drains his original ending of its impact, and to make things even worse, instead of being known as a tragic hero, he's now seen as that gun-toting hedgehog who swears a bunch. His story immediately afterwards also gives him amnesia, making a lot of what happens there feel like a needless detour. So yeah, that all really sucks. On the other hand, his dynamic with Team Dark is really heartwarming, and his character and story in 06 is just great, since we see just how much more heroic and independent he's become. It's honestly just wonderful to see Shadow live his own life after all this time. Man, I can't believe that all they needed to do to make him work was organically build off of what came before. Who knew? I sure hope they're able to figure that out again. So, you take the good with the bad, you win some, you lose some. While I would say I'm overall glad he came back, if only for his story in 06, I can't help but wonder how much more he'd mean to me if SA2 was all we got from him. That said, I can always look back at that game and remember why I loved him in the first place. He was a tragic hero and a true friend. That will always be Shadow to me, and I'll never forget that original memory of the character, which, at the end of the day, I think is all that really matters. As always, I hope you enjoyed the video, and thanks for watching.